Good morning. I'm sorry I can't be with you there in Paris. I'm here in Hong Kong, getting ready to get on a flight to Korea because this is a subject that I'm extremely passionate about, the role of internet and the way it's affecting journalism. And it was suggested that perhaps the most useful thing I could bring into this discussion is to share my experiences as a journalist and the way that the internet has affected the way that I have worked. I was a correspondent for the International Herald Tribune and the New York Times for many years, based in postings around the world. And I'd basically divide the internet's effect on the way I work into three distinct phases. They are first, internal communication, second, research, and third, social media. First, internal communication, very quickly before I have to get on this flight, is about 1997, 95, 97. This was a period in which the internet was used by correspondents such as myself out in the field as a way to improve communication. We began using email regularly. We could send in stories much faster than we could before. The internet was certainly not seen as a way to distribute news, and it was really primarily something that made our job out in the field a lot easier. The second phase is research. This is where the internet came of age in terms of a way to find information. I had the good fortune to do a story, for example, where Google Cache allowed me to find out that a prominent Hong Kong businessman had not, in fact, graduated from Stanford when he claimed to. And this was very much something in the field, something that correspondents were using rather than something where the newsroom was driving it. It was very much an independent thing. It became something where you could really find a lot of information, where you could get stories that were otherwise unobtainable. One impact on correspondence was, for example, you would no longer be coordinating so much with a Home Office reporter. You would be expected to file the information with the updates from Washington, for example, or wherever it was, rather than coordinating with the Washington correspondent, because now that information was available online. This change it affected particularly news magazines, for example, where large teams would be brought to bear on a story, but now you didn't need to have that correspondent in Saigon covering the Vietnam War, didn't need to have the Washington bureau so much, because they could actually get that information themselves. So this is sort of the second phase, the research phase of the internet and the way it affected journalists. The third phase, which is the one which we are now in, is, to my mind, by far the most interesting phase. This is what I would call the social media phase. This is where we have changes taking place that affect not only the way that journalism is done from the point of view of a correspondent out in the field, but right back into the newsroom. The way in which all of the processes, the systems through which the newsroom operates, and the way in which we do our jobs has changed entirely. This has implications with journalists who are no longer just journalists, and the audience is no longer just an audience. In fact, the audience themselves have all become sharers, they've become publishers themselves, broadcasters with systems such as this Nokia N95 that I'm using to speak to you today. And it really fundamentally changes the whole role of journalism and journalists. This is really the phase where I became most passionate about digital and began to see real limits in what I could do within the structure of a traditional news media organization. These limits were really internally created, and I would describe them as short-sightedness and nervousness on the part of journalists and editorial departments about how to deal with this new media world. People didn't know what the new rules were, how should they act, what should they give away. Some of these debates are very much still going on today about whether we should give away content for free if we want to have subscribers. What is the best way to deal with these? There's still debates that are happening today, to be fair. But from my own perspective, I just felt that I wasn't making any headway. This is a change in the way that we communicate on a par with the invention of movable type. And my industry, which was founded based on the invention of movable type, newspapers, really weren't pushing the barriers. So from my perspective, I pushed them as much as I could internally, and then externally I moved ahead and did what I felt I had to do, which was try to understand this new media world by, for example, launching my own blog. The purpose of my blog was a number of things. It was to establish my own digital identity, which is something that I recognized as extremely important, and I think far too many journalists underestimate its importance. It was to experiment online to try to understand how new media worked and how I could work in this new media environment and what are all the tools that I could possibly use. And I quickly found a number of effects. For one thing, I found it extremely liberating to no longer be held to old rules and constrictions. I could do YouTube videos such as this, which has been described as Christian Amanpour meets the Blair Witch Project. The other aspects were search. I would find that my articles that I wrote on my blog, even when I just started my blog, would turn up higher on search results. One interesting finding is that if you search for my name, although I was paid, my salary was paid for many, many years by an internationally recognized American news corporation, the New York Times Company and the International Herald Tribune. If you search for my name, it's my blog that comes up first. So quickly I established my digital identity beyond that of the International Herald Tribune and New York Times, who'd paid my salary for so many years, much to the chagrin of their shareholders. But it also meant that I could bring discussions about subjects that I cared about, and I could bring in readers in a way that built a relationship beyond what was happening in the newspaper. This led to many interesting conversations. It led to many offline meetings with people, and over time, more and more frustration about being stuck within a structure that at the time I felt really wasn't moving in the direction where I was moving. That's when I decided to make the move away from journalism, leave this job, a Paris-based features writer for the International Herald Tribune, which was a difficult decision to leave that, but I felt I was being left behind where I was while this revolution was taking place. The story of what happened to me in brief is that I was approached by a Hong Kong media tycoon to work with him in dealing with many of these issues of digital strategy, which is an opportunity I could not turn down, and now have moved on to work for Ogilvy, running their social media strategy across Asia Pacific. So where does that mean that I am? Where does that put me? Basically, it puts me exactly where I want to be. I am able to use all of these new media tools, which, although they are highly destructive to the profit margins of media companies, empower an individual such as myself to use mobile phones, YouTube, blogs, Twitter, to reach an audience which was formerly unfathomable in size and communicate with them. It also puts me in a zone where I'm working with some of the world's biggest brands and companies to understand how they can use social media and the sort of tactics they can use. One side note to that is that I look with dismay at the news media industry to see how little they use the basic advice that we give now, or that I give now, to multinationals about how they should be monitoring conversations and how they can deal with conversations online about their products. Moreover, a lot of these companies are looking at using social media in a way that really cuts out advertising and media entirely. They no longer need to go through the media with advertising to relate to consumers on an individual basis, which is wildly powerful from their perspective and should be of great concern to the news media. On a personal level, this puts me on in the exact zone where I want to be. As a reporter, I always wanted to be on the cutting edge, the front line, in the war zone, at the central bank when they were devaluing the currency. Here I am, working in the heart of this revolution that is changing the way that humans interact and communicate. And I am doing that while sharing those thoughts and writing. I've only ever been a writer in my life, and I still have that great outlet with my blog, where I really feel like I do have impact. I very much look forward to following these discussions and how they proceed, and would very much like to be involved in any way I can in helping them forward. I think these are tremendously important issues, and I hope that my personal journey, I'm about to start my next one here, will help in some way with moving this forward. So that's Thomas Crampton from Gate 64, reporting for thomascrampton.com. Thank you.